All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my second workshop, How to Plan a Successful Kickoff. As I said before, I am Justin Louie, and I am a strategy mentor for Team 599 Robodox and an alumni of 1678 Citrus Circuits. All right. So what we're going to be going through today is, first off, a little bit about my background again, and then we're going to go through how to prep in the off season for kickoff, and then the first weekend of kickoff itself. So my background. As I said before, I am a member of FRC 1678, where I was a student from 2017 to 2020. I participated in the kickoffs from all 4 of those years, but I helped in particular with the planning of 2019, and I was the sole planner for it in 2020. I was a part of the software scouting sub-team, as well as the strategy sub-team lead, and I helped out with various outreach projects. Now I'm a mentor for FRC 599, where I help with the leadership and strategy components and whatever the students ask me for help with. But I also never been a truly technical person in that I have never touched the robot besides putting on bumpers. I've never coded a robot, and I have never designed a robot, unless you count a VexIQ robot. So a photo over here is a little bit of what I did, where I planned a kickoff for about 100 people to be prepared to watch the stream while have everything else set up for the rest of the day. All right, so off-season preparation. Kickoff doesn't actually truly begin on the day of kickoff. It's everything that you did to prepare for it, culminating on the final weekend of kickoff. So this could be off-season tasks, curriculum, integrating new members, and so forth. All right, so going into it, we're going to start with the curriculum. What do you need to do to make sure that all of your students are up to par for the upcoming build season? Well, you need to build a set of curriculum that changes year to year. You want to have the generals down so you know what skills they require. Is it hardware, software, business and media, or scouting, strategy, or chairman's? Generally, some students overlap depending on what they choose to do, but you want to make sure that overall your team has all the necessary skills. And I say that you have to update this year to year because you're going to find what was lacking when you were trained or when you train someone else. You might think, dang, I wish that we did this. Write that down and bring it up so that in the upcoming year, you have that ready to be trained as part of the new curriculum. If you feel like you were lacking in people who knew how to CAD, you should focus on really training your current members and new recruits in CAD. If you feel that your programming wasn't that great, you should fix that. If you feel like it was messy and that there was not a great workflow, but you had good programming, you should focus on learning how to do GitHub so that you can have clear and streamlined programming pathways from pulling a repository to merging it into the master branch on the master fork. You're going to want to have debriefs on it along the way so that as you go about it, you can figure out what could we have done better. It could be after each mini project, it could be after the off season, or it could be after the build season or comp season. You can choose to do one over summer, but I would recommend that if you do one during summer, it is a whole year retrospective, because oftentimes people take it a little bit easier during the summer, so it's not a true reflection of what you guys are going to do. And finally, implementing the curriculum. You're going to want to have teachers for this. So you can have mentors, or you could have the veteran students teach the curriculum in a lecture style that is accompanied with workshops. So this could mean having hands-on training for actual hardware and machines so that they get approved to use those machines without with mentor supervision in the shop during the season so that no one gets hurt. Or it could be something like going through programming lessons. You're going to want to implement curriculum into those projects. So speaking of these projects, you're going to want to have the projects that you design based around the curriculum that you have decided is required. So these are a few ideas that you could do for some of them. You could have off-season robots, such as a second robot to compete at title Tumble. You can have other technical projects, or you could choose to improve old code if you are on the software side. So if you have a scouting system, this means you're updating features and cleaning up the code, making it run a little bit faster. Or if you're on the robot side, you can choose to actually look at the published code bases. So as a NorCal kid, I paid attention primarily to the NorCal region and the champs teams. So the teams that I always remember being referred to for code was, of course, 971 and 254 as some of the best teams in NorCal, along with my own team, because we also would publish a code base every single year. So all you have to do is go to Chief Delphi, look up a team number, and you can find out what things they have published. So it could be their CAD, or it could be their code, or something else. And for business and media, this is going to be a little bit different in that it's not so much a training season. This is actually their main season. You want to get enough money to be able to get through the build and competition season. So really, it's not so much of training as much as learning on the job while writing grants and applying for sponsorships. What they can do for training is learn how to do good social media posts, and they can learn how to make good recap videos. Now, as I mentioned on the previous slide, I think it's really good for veterans to teach. So this means that the older students teach the newer students. You need to have the patience to do this, but it comes off a little bit better because it's not as intimidating. You want to have it so that it's still an understanding of, oh, I recently learned it. I know what I wish I had. And you teach them how you wish you were taught. And the best way to do that is not just have veteran students assigned to teaching. You want to have them so that they're assigned to specific individuals, as well as having overall teachers. And you want to have the same students working on projects together so that they always have people to rely on. Now, there's a number of different resources you can learn online with. There's First Updates Now. You can go on First, but my favorite is personally Chief Delphi. You can find a lot of great resources on there. So, a question for you guys. Do you guys have any idea of projects that you can do to train your team members? Feel free to throw it in the chat or just speak up. All right. If you didn't say it out loud, that's okay. We'll just move on and you guys can see if they match up with what you thought of in your head. So you can use, for hardware, you can design challenges for your students. You can use old game elements and have prototyping challenges and competitions where you divide students up into different teams and see who can have the best scoring mechanism. You can also choose to improve on old mechanisms from previous robots, or just doing maintenance on the robots so that they get a general understanding of how to do the hand tools to be able to do it at outreach events. This could be showing off your robot at events. It could be helping out with things in the community involving STEM and so forth. If you're on the software side, you can choose two main different things. You can build a chat app, or you can do a mechanism for old robots. And finally, for business and media, you guys can practice taking photos by getting candid shots in the shop of the members on the team working on different things. It could be the students programming, it could be them fabricating things, driving the robot, and so forth. You'll want to document these things for outreach and for social media in the future. Now, one thing I didn't put on here is you can always find a way to incorporate your training into outreach. If you find projects that can help out with the team in some other way, that's always a great thing. You can also do things that help the community. One thing that Citrus did was they had a shelter finder app, which was used by the police to help connect homeless people to the local shelter so that they could get housing. That's a really creative idea that we have that we could do to train our members how to program and also train others in how to do public relations and marketing so that we could get this app out there. and this was used by the media, by the local police, and it was highlighted in the local newspaper a number of times. Other things is, if you watch the previous workshop I gave, you can find different tasks that just benefit the team overall, such as for 1678, the scanner team needed specific cases that would house our tablets in a safe way, but also had chargers built into it. So we gave that task to the electrical subteam, and the electrical subteam made those charging cases custom for us. They went to the mechanical team to CAD out the wood that we laser cut for it, and then the electrical team soldered the electronics together and assembled it for us. The most obvious thing that you can do for training in off-season is preparing for off-season competitions. You can participate with just your old robot, but I think it's best to actually build a second robot if you have the budget to, so that you can compete with 2 robots at this competition and give more people the opportunity to have hands-on building experience, programming experience, and so that you guys can have multiple people driving the robot. This makes it so that it's an exciting thing for new members as well as old members to get excited about, and it gives you a very tangible guidelines and a hard deadline of when you need to complete everything by so that you can compete. It'll help you make sure that you know what you need to work on in the future for build season, and it'll teach you how it is to be on a robotics team. So this will also make sure that you know to do the following in the build season. You'll want to have driver practice for the different drive teams. You want to be able to figure out how to deal with the stress of competition, and you'll know the competition schedule, and you'll learn how to fix a robot under time pressure, and you can learn from other teams there for what you want to take back to your shop, as well as just the behind the scenes work of preparing for the competition technically. One of the later things that you need to do right before each build season is prepare the resources that you need. So this means that you are purchasing all of the materials you'll need beforehand. And by all of them, I mean the ones that you know you will need. So this could be wood for prototyping or for actual mechanisms. You want metal to be able to cut out with machines if you have the big machines such as a lathe, mill, or CNC. And you want general things like bearings and screws. Or you could go onto West Coast Products to find the most commonly used FRC things, such as wheels and intake wheels, to build your robot. You're going to want to also clean up the shop right before kickoff so that everything is organized and you know where everything is right before kickoff. So you're not scrambling on the kickoff prototyping stage to figure out where everything is. You're going to want to make sure the equipment is working, especially computers. You're going to want to make sure all the hardware is in the right spots. You want to make sure your hand tools are charged and stored, and you want to sort the materials that you just bought so that they are organized and easy to access. You're also going to want to have clean floor and empty out all the trash and just make sure it's safe to work. This is generally going to take a whole weekend. So a fun way that you can do this is have what we call a WADBAN, work all day, play all night. So you work all day to clean up the shop, nothing technical. No one is allowed to be doing things like fixing up a robot. No one's allowed to be doing their off-season projects. It is purely cleaning up the shop and preparing for kickoff. And then as soon as you finish up with that, generally around 5 o'clock, if you start at 9 a.m., you transition to the play all night. So that means that you guys have dinner catered, or you pack your own dinners, whatever you choose to do. And then you have fun activities for the team to do as a team bonding thing before kickoff, because while I don't have it included in here, you do want to have the team be very socially connected so that you are prepared to go into build season together. All right. Now we actually get into the planning for the logistics of kickoff. So you have to figure out who goes to kickoff and who stays at home if you have a large enough team. At 40-ish people on a team, you're going to be pushing the boundaries of how many people you're allowed to bring to kickoff, especially when this includes the adults who are driving you there. Instead, it's probably better to have 10 to 20 people go to kickoff the live stream and have the rest of the people stay at the shop. Personally, I also prefer just staying at the home shop because then I don't have to wake up as early. It's not as much of a transportation issue. You just go to your shop, set up, and watch everything from there. But I definitely say that everyone should experience going to the kickoff live stream once in their time as a student. So there's different questions aside from who gets to go. You have to figure out how many people do you need to drive, who are the actual drivers, So this could be mentors, adults, or the parents. And you also need to figure out where you're meeting. Are you guys meeting at school? Are you having every team or every carpool dropped off at a specific house for each one? And how are you making sure that everyone is picked up? Finally, you need to make sure that you have some sort of attendance system so that you don't lose your track of your students at the venue. I'm actually going to expand this and say that you should have a attendance system for every competition. The easiest one that I figured out, or that I've used in the past, and a number of teams have picked this up afterwards, is to just number off every student. You have a roster of who's going to a competition with their role next to them, but you categorize it based off of that, and then you give each student their number. So it goes, for example, on Citrus, 1 to 44 for our entire travel team. Everyone gets a number. As one of the strategists, my number was around 19 to 22-ish every competition. And someone will just say roll call, and everyone's, you know, that means that person, the first person shouts 1, and then you go all the way till the end. And if there is a pause because that person is missing, you know that person is missing. This can allow you to take attendance of a team of 44 students within less than a minute. Finally, you will want to designate someone to pick up the kit of parts at the competition. You don't want to be like, oh, shoot, who picked it up? Did we remember to pick it up? Oh, we have to go back for it. No, you want to designate a specific person to pick it up before you go to the venue. At your home venue, there are a different set of logistics that you need to consider. You need to consider, do we have a strong Wi-Fi connection that allows us to watch the stream? This means, is Twitch connected, or is Twitch able to be played, or do you have to make sure that that the firewall is bypassed? At some schools, Twitch will be blocked, and if you cannot figure that out on the day of, that's going to be very difficult, because then no one can watch it unless they're just streaming it on their phone, and that is inefficient compared to just playing it on a screen for everyone. You're also going to want to make sure that everyone knows where they're sitting, or have some sort of layout planned ahead of time. So this means that you want to have tables and chairs set up ahead of time, not the morning of. You want to do it a different day, maybe the day beforehand, because that way you're not waking up extra early just to set that up beforehand. You're also going to want to set up power strips and extension cords so that anyone who is using a computer has easy access to charging. And you're going to want to be able to display a seating map on the wall so that everyone knows where they sit. That way you don't get friend groups grouping up or veteran students grouping up, and instead everyone is mixed up so that there is an equal distribution of knowledge throughout the team and more people get to know each other. Additional things that you'll want to prepare for are having whiteboards and markers, including the dry erase or wet erase that you need for it. You're going to want to have projectors. And if your team is large enough, or if you think it is necessary, you can have a microphone and speaker system set up so that everyone can hear what one person is saying whenever you're the main person talking. Finally, you're going to want to have some sort of paper and pencil around so that everyone can can draw things out if needed. And you're going to want to tell people to bring their own laptops or iPads or use their phones to be able to read through the game manual and eventually take a rules test that I will be talking about on a future slide. So additional things that you can do for your team to make it a little bit easier for them is provide breakfast and drinks before on the day of. You don't want them to go the whole day without eating breakfast when they're waking up that early. You want to give them the option of doing that so that they can function properly. You're also going to want to download the game manual ahead of time, because if you choose to access it on the day it is released, it might not load for you because so many people are accessing the exact same PDF all around the world online at the exact same time, and sometimes it takes a long time to load because of that. Instead, what you can do is download the encrypted game manual within the week beforehand and just type in the password as soon as it comes out. Later on, you can download the unencrypted manual with the rules on it, and that is easier to access, but this makes it so that you can save time. You can also designate veteran members to wander around and help out, and make sure that some veteran members are scattered throughout the different tables to be able to answer questions. This is why I say you want to have a seating chart mapped out ahead of time so that you know where the veterans are sitting, to make sure everyone has a veteran student around them. Specifically, on Citrus, we have it so that veteran members are stationed at different tables, but anyone who is on the leadership team will be wandering around to help out after the game menu, after the rules test is created. Or in your case, you could have the leadership team wandering around for the whole time, and veteran students in general are helping out the new students with reading the manuals. Finally, you're going to want to review the schedule and plan with the entire team before kickoff so everyone knows what to do. You can even have a mock kickoff for all the new members ahead of time by doing it with an old game. So one that your team has, or that one that whoever is playing that mock kickoff has experienced, so that they know the game, but not something that those new students would have experienced. So not 1 year ago, but maybe 2 years ago would be a good game to have for a mock kickoff. The only thing is, I will say, please do not do 2015 for the game, because that is the game no one speaks of. All right. Finally, the kickoff schedule. So once you have done all of the off-season prep, all it comes down to is actually following through with a schedule and a plan and not straying from it in order to maximize your time on kickoff. You're going to get a lot of people who want to rush ahead or stray from this schedule, but if you constrain it to this, you will stay within the scope and make the max use of your time during this during this weekend. So one question to keep in mind is, what is the most important part of kickoff? Does anyone have a guess for that? Feel free to shout it out or just throw it in the chat. You can also just DM me personally. So I see the game. Does anyone else have anything similar? Understanding the rules. Communication. Communication is also very important. Thank you, William and Jackie. Does anyone else have anything to add? You can also just shout out the same thing that others have said. All right. The answer is the game manual. So understanding the rules and figuring out the requirements and limitations from it is correct. So the most important thing is read the game manual. If you don't, you're not going to understand what the game is. You can say, oh, why don't we build a 6-foot tall robot? Because that's what we did last year. No, that'll get you guys to not even have a real season, because you're going to build a robot that cannot compete. You're going to want to read the game rules, and you're going to want to actually take a rules test. Every year, 1678 releases a rules test, and a number of other teams do as well, but personally, and I might be a little bit biased, I think that the 1678 one is the best, as someone who's written one of those. Every year it's released probably by 10 or 11 o'clock, and it's put on Chief Delphi, and everyone has access to it around the world. Don't be afraid if you fail it on the first try. Maybe 20 to 30% of the kids on Citrus will pass it on their first attempt. It's a hard test. Generally, only veteran students pass it on their first try. And yeah, it's a great way to know all of the specifics of the game, how many items there are on the field, the scoring metrics, the major foul rules, what a foul is worth, ranking points, and so forth. The other thing is, you need to be able to understand how this game relates to previous games. Generally, FRC games relate into one of two different types of games. There's placing games, such as 2018, where you're placing cubes, or 2017, where you're placing gears. And there's other ones as well, like 2015. And then there's shooting games like 2016, 2017 was also a shooting game, 2022 was a shooting game. Those are the general two types of games there are. Is it going to have a flat open field that is easy to drive fast on without any visibility issues or obstacles? Or is it a game with those visual impediments in the way? there are special scenarios where there could be something like a sandstorm period instead of an auto, where you visibly cannot see the field. All of these things are things to consider. You might not be able to predict the whole sandstorm thing. That was a thing that came and took me by surprise when that happened, but these are things to consider. And finally, endgame. Endgame has become something of a template every year. At the end of the game, you climb, and multiple team members need to climb to be able to get a ranking point. And these endgame activities are unbalanced in the game, and that sometimes climbing is the only thing you need to do to be able to overpower the other team to win. When you're thinking of these previous games, take ideas from old robots that you've actually built, and not just from yours, but from other teams as well. You can look at YouTube videos online and figure it out from there. So that is one thing that you can do, and that will give you a huge advantage. Sometimes teams have actually used the old game elements from those games to try and sort of create prototyping ideas, or even prototype with those to be able to build off of it. All right, so now we're going to get into the actual kickoff schedule. So on the first day, I believe it's 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock when the kickoff live stream starts. You watch that for about an hour, and everyone is watching that. Don't be talking and chit-chatting. You want to just focus on that, unless you know which parts are unnecessary. If you're actually at the venue, you're going to want to just pay attention, primarily just to be a polite person at the venue. At 10 o'clock, you're going to want to read the game manual. As soon as it comes out, type in the password. You're also going to want to have it so that someone writes down that password and sends it in your Discord or Slack so that everyone can access that. Later on, you can also send out the open source game rules, the open source or the unencrypted game manual in your communication channels so that everyone has access to that. And once it's open sourced, you're also going to want to take a game rules test, as I mentioned. This makes sure that everyone has the same baseline understanding of the game. It helps you make sure that you can find loopholes in the game. It helps you make sure that you understand it and that no one is going to say ideas that are not within the game parameters. Afterwards, you're going to want to break for lunch. Make sure that everyone goes out for lunch. This is going to be a really long day, and people who choose to stay inside for lunch are going to burn themselves out. It sounds simple, it sounds silly, but if they are refusing to go out for lunch, take away their computer. Make them eat lunch. After you have that 1 hour break, you start to get into the actual thing of what people consider to be actual kickoff work. You're going to start with the what's. What can a robot do? You're going to list out every single thing. Shoot in the high hub, shoot in the low hub, shoot from what positions, drive how fast, drive in what directions, climbing which parts of it, climb with how many robots. Whatever you think can be done will be stated on there. Just because it sounds ridiculous doesn't mean it shouldn't go up there. So long as it falls within the game parameters, you want to put that up there. That should take about an hour. After that, you can start narrowing it down to what your team should do. That means that you are starting to eliminate the things that are on the board. Sometimes it's not because it's the most advantageous, but it's because what your team chooses to focus on. For example, if a team shoots in the low hub this year, should they shoot in the high hub? Maybe. But if a team can accurately shoot in the high hub, should they take time to learn how to score in the low hub? I would argue against that, because to me, that seems like a waste of their time when they can choose to focus on a scoring activity that will give them more points consistently. These are the types of things you should consider. Some teams choose to break their teams into their table groups to fill out a prompt first. And this will allow you to get a general idea for the game and help you figure out what you actually should do and what are the most important rules after you have done the rules test. If you choose to, you can develop your own prompts for that, or you can choose to just go into it as a team for what your team should do, or can and then should do. Make sure you end by 5 o'clock, because the next day is also going to be equally rigorous, and you want your teammates to not be burnt out with just one day. You still have the rest of the weekend. Some schools offer the Monday off as well, which I have not included in this presentation, but you also have to consider you need to have a sustainable schedule for the entirety of the build season. All right, day 2. You're going to want to start off with a quick recap of the what's. What have you put on the list and what have you eliminated and why? You're going to want to continue having these team debates where you are not speaking over each other. One person speaks at a time to say what you want to do. Eventually, you're going to have a narrowed down list of what you will be doing. You're going to want to make sure that this is put on a Google Doc, kept on a whiteboard, make sure that everyone has access to it and no one is changing it, because if you change it, chances are you're going to have wasted time and it's going to say, oh, well, we've already changed it a little bit. We can continue changing this what's list throughout the season. If truly needed, you can, but try not to change that list. After you finish that up, probably by 10 or 11 o'clock, you're going to want to transition to the hows. So at this point, personally, I have actually not experienced this because the non-technical sub-teams split off. That means the scouting team starts developing their list of what's list for the scouting system for the upcoming year. And the business and media team starts working on their business and media stuff. That could include them planning out what media posts they are doing. It could be documenting everything and so forth. But the hows means that the technical sub-teams are brainstorming the types of mechanisms that you guys intend to prototype. So you could prototype 1 to 2 different intakes, 1 to 2 different scoring mechanisms, or something that can do both. You could choose to have climbing mechanisms and so forth. All of those will be considered different prototypes. It could be also some sort of indexing system that teams had this year for indexing how many balls they had stored inside of them. If you finish before 11 o'clock, you can transition earlier if the what's have been finished. Again, you're going to want to break for lunch just to make sure that your students are taking a break. Again, I'm going to say, make sure that the students who are inside take a break and have lunch. Make sure they eat a little bit. They don't have to eat a lot, just eat a little bit to keep themselves going, and make sure that they are taking a complete break from it where they are able to socialize and have fun. Because not only is it good to make sure they don't burn out, generally it's the veteran students who are doing this. And if the veteran students are doing this, that sets a bad precedent for the newcomers of what the team is like, and that maybe they will think, oh, am I not doing enough? Or, oh, should I be doing that when I'm older? No, you want to make sure that everyone is taking a break to make sure that everyone knows what they need to do. It sets a good team culture and make sure that it's a sustainable work culture. After lunch, you're going to want to continue the house discussion. And once you've decided the different types of mechanisms, you're going to begin prototyping. Generally, you prototype with wood and hand tools because that's simple and cheaper than prototyping with metal. At the end of the day, you present the progress of your prototype mechanisms so that everyone understands the progress of them. And you're not going to nix any of these yet, but it gives you a general idea of where you want to dedicate more resources to. After that, you continue your prototyping, and probably by the end of the first week of build season, you will have figured out which mechanisms you're going to continue with, and you're going to start actually building them out and refining those and dedicating more team resources to them. Ideally, by the end of the second or third week, you will have a completely catted out robot that you are just fabricating and fine-tuning. And by probably the third or fourth week, it will be programmed out where you can start doing driver practice and so forth, but it will need a lot of refining. So if you have the Monday off, then you can choose to just continue prototyping where you iterate and program on it. But that is about all. After that, you just go into how you guys choose to run your build season. Have a schedule built out for the rest of the build season. Try and stick to it. It's okay to fall behind, but do your best to stick with it. Now, some final notes. Stick with your robot requirements list. Don't go changing it up just because you have a great new idea. Chances are you've already discussed through it if you did the kickoff right, and you don't need to change anything. Don't be afraid to mess up. It's okay. This is a learning experience for the students and the mentors. Mentors are learning some technical stuff sometimes, other times it's learning how to manage a team or how to teach others. And the students, this is all an educational program. It's okay to mess up. And if anything, you should be encouraged to, so you learn from your mistakes. Don't be afraid to ask for advice from the veterans and the mentors. While it is okay to mess up, sometimes the veterans and the mentors have already made those mistakes or heard of those mistakes from others, and they can prevent it so that they teach you it without you having to make that mistake. Everyone is there to learn, and everyone is also there to teach each other. So just make sure you take advantage of that and always do whatever you can to learn the most through this program. So from there, just continue with the rest of your build season. And that is all. Thank you for coming, and let me know if you guys have any questions. And again, if you are not comfortable with speaking up on Zoom, feel free to just DM me or put it in the chat. And we'll assume that if no questions are thrown out by 12:40, that'll be it for today. All right, so we have a question. How do you make sure people stay on task and things are finished by the time things should be? So for the first part, how do you make sure people stay on task? It comes down to two different types of people. It comes down to the mentors and it comes down to the sub-team leads. They should be the ones making sure that everyone is focused and sticking on task. It could be a gentle reminder or a more serious talk, depending on how frequently this is happening, but they're the ones who set that precedent. If you feel like you can do it as a veteran member, you can also just be like, hey, we should get back on track, or let's try and answer this question. There's really nice and subtle ways to do it where you don't even need to be like, hey, you need to focus. What I like to do is ask a question like, hey, what do you think of this? Or why don't we work on this question? So that it's not an accusationary or anything. It's just a, what do you guys think of this? And it redirects their focus. You guys should also have a general rule of no phones out unless it's for robotics related things, such as looking things up online or Slack or Chief Delphi, something like that. Or if you like, you can have music playing in the background, that's fine. But you should have those things as general team understandings. In terms of how to make sure things are finished on time, do you mean specifically for kickoff or in general? Or do you want me to answer both? All right, on kickoff, whoever is coordinating kickoff will be in charge of managing that schedule. The schedule I put on here might not work for you guys. That is one that we use for citrus circuits, roughly, but I also modified it already to fit the 599 schedule this past year. It wasn't completely implemented, but Danielle used it for you guys. And if you guys just try and stick to it in general, that'll help. But you want someone to act as a mediator, keeping along with the schedule, making sure people stay on task and are focused on it to keep along with it. For build season, it comes down to whoever is managing those small projects. Are they pushing you guys hard enough? Are they focusing? Are they making sure you guys get the resources and help from the mentors and so forth? If a task you find out has grown larger than expected, then of course it is okay to either cut down on what is included in that task or assign more people to it or just expand the deadline. But if you have managed it so that you have the right constraints, all that is required is making sure that people have enough knowledge and focus to get a task done. Are there any other questions? in that case, thank you everyone for coming. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to email me at justinmyoung@gmail.com and I'll be happy to respond. Or text me at 530-400-4182. Generally, I'm not great at checking the Discord for 599, so people know to text me. Just preface it that you are from 599 or from whatever FRC team you are a part of, and I will be happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Let me stop the recording.